right, guys. So I'm just going to tap back in. So I'm going to access the violet flame of transmutation again. And if you'll all just center back into your heart space and help me by violet flaming the whole room and setting an intention. Let's set an intention that we bring through pure channeling, protected, clean and clear, grounded, that all of our energetics stay neutral to one another or something better, and that through your very specific divine guardian beings, you receive any healing and information that helps your highest good, and you filter out everything else that does not. And I'm going to set my intention to call in loving, high, vibrational energetics, grounding out, asking Archangel Michael for protection. And I say I'm calling in Saint Germain, and I want to clarify that beings of that high of a vibration and density, they give us a name so we can identify, but at that point they're a consciousness, they're a collective. So just be aware of that it comes in as a consciousness, but humans like to associate with an identity, okay? So I call in Saint Germain to assist us, and I'm going to activate and connect into my Akashic records. Hello, beloved beings of love and light. Thank you for bringing me forward today. I am so honored to be here, and I am feeling happy and boisterous that we are approaching this topic today. Your environment is highly affected by your relational experiences. And I am very grateful that the first question that was prompted speaks of self-relationship, because ultimately that is all that there is. The only true relationship is relationship with self. Everything else is a projection onto a screen outside of self. You are constantly moving and navigating through your internal energetics, beliefs, and emotions projected onto another human being or another energy or entity that you're having a relationship with, and they are relaying back to you your projection. Now, this might sound dichotomous because, after all, that other human being has free will, though, as many of you are aware, all things are energetics. You understand the law of attraction. We are aware, for the most part, of synchronicities. So because all things are energies, and you attract energetics that match or harmonize or complement your energetics, the other human being or energy or situation will also have a free will experience that matches your experience. You come into communion, you make an agreement as it will. Chloe calls it contracts. But when healers speak about contracts, they're not necessarily speaking of something written as a clause. It's simply an energetic match. So it's very, very important to understand, no matter what, the primary relationship is self, because every experience you have in life is a projection of your truth or your belief system outside of you so that you can view it. You are a projector, and your reality is your screen that you view. Now, it's important to understand that while other people will relay their experiences through their projection, the way you understand that this is true is the way you perceive or interpret or process their information. You can shift your perspectives in the way you process by either moving into more negative energetics or releasing judgments, separation, limitation, the past, and opening into a more pure, neutral truth. This is also channeling. You are asking questions of how do you receive another's understandings and possibly their projections and their judgments in a way that is neutral, so that regardless of your triggers or upsets or beliefs or views, you are allowing them to come forward through a neutral container so that you can walk around it, you can observe it and witness it, and hopefully see many more perspectives than the one that you might initially engage in. Is this the question? And then he's asking you. Is that clarified? Okay. And that is such a wonderful mastery tool. Most humans have difficulty with this because you are all addicted and attached to personalization. And of course, we understand that, though that is the way it is. Are you able to withdraw your beliefs, your value systems even, and that addresses the Instagram, and allow things to simply come through neutrally? Can you suspend everything that you perceive to be right and wrong, true and untrue, and allow it to simply come through as a neutral platform? Because after all, your social constructs, your cultural experiences, your religions or spiritual indoctrinations, your sexuality preferences, your race, all of it imposes onto the way that you perceive and receive information, other people's actions, instigate your emotional responses. Does this make sense? Excellent. Now, we're still and will speak of self-love and self-relationship this entire communication. We are overlaying many lessons here, so be aware that there are multiple understandings that you can gain from everything that we offer. Self-relations is also the same as interpersonal or inter-animal relations, because the most critical person you have to watch out for is yourself. It is far more easy, in general, for those that love you or at least respect you, admire you, to see wonderful, invigorating, inspiring qualities that you innately have than it is for you to witness these truths. And this is why it's very important to understand the container of neutrality, like a fire. A fire is pure. You know that if you put your hand in it and it burns you, that if you get angry, that's your response, but it's not the fire's fault. It is a fire. It burns. It has very specific physical and alchemical properties. You utilize it for what it's worth, and you take care and beware of the damage that it can cause. You also need to understand that every body is vacillating and resonating on a specific, what Chloe terms as baseline frequency. Your energy has a range, but in general, it shows up in the same way day to day, and it slowly progresses or it slowly diminishes. Most of you understand this concept in regard to relating to other people as bad vibes or good vibes. Some people you simply don't resonate with. This doesn't make them bad or wrong or you negative. It's simply the dynamics of energetics. This is very important to understand in regard to relationship. Just because you're vibrating on a different frequency does not mean you need to impose a belief or a judgment or an identification or a label to it. Can you bring in information in a neutral way? How do we do this, even with self? We understand that what makes your reality real to you is your emotional response to it. Does everybody agree with this? Yes. That is very important, because all of you have experienced, either profoundly and very immediately, or over time, with experience, altering your emotional state. All of us have experienced being able to completely shift our view and our perspective of a certain situation as our emotions shifted. So, if you can anchor a simplistic fact that emotions will always influence your perspective on your reality. They will always influence the way you view yourself and the way you view others. That's just the way it is. That's okay. That's wonderful. Now, knowing that, are you allowing your emotions to be the majority dominant deciding factor in any given situation, any given perspective, or communication, or self-relation? Because if you are, they're surely going to alter once your emotions shift. So, you allow yourself to acknowledge, okay, in my emotional state, I'm experiencing and perceiving this in this way. This is very real to me, and I'm responding, I'm possibly reacting. And I'm also aware that there are other perspectives outside of my emotional understanding of this. Let me take some time and peruse these alternate perspectives. I don't have to negate that my emotional perspective is wrong. I don't have to say it's right. I simply have to be willing to allow other perspectives to exist in this now moment, and I will offer myself some space and time to flip through the different perspectives and chew on them, and possibly get feedback from my partner about this or from myself. It can very much help to write it down, because often the things that we justify and feel and experience and believe, especially the ones that a part of you knows is highly ludicrous, though you cannot bypass the experience that you're believing them or feeling them, when you write them down, it can give you drastic clarity. When you do this, it is imperative for you to understand that acceptance, allowance, is the only factor in this universe that has the ability to alter and change and transform anything. I'm going to repeat that because that is a very profound understanding. Allowance and acceptance is the only factor in this universe that creates transformation and change. We've all had experiences where resistance brings more of the same. It amplifies it. So, on this note, in regard to past experiences and the letting go, and in regard to having upsets around Instagram, it is very important to understand that you are loving yourself by accepting that this is how you feel. It is extremely imperative to have ample acceptance. I accept that in this moment I'm upset. I accept that in this moment I feel my partner is enacting infidelity. I accept that in this moment I cannot love myself. I accept that in this moment I cannot get over my past breakup. I allow it to exist because it already exists. It does not make sense to tell the person next to you that because you don't like their face, they do not exist. Just don't look at them. You allow them to exist, you accept that you do not enjoy their face, and then you take responsibility. You take responsibility and you make a choice that does not impose onto their energetics. You help yourself. And then you realize that you have issues with people's faces. Very key. Simplistic solutions to all of this. How do we simply become aware and neutral that something exists? Our human will impose emotion onto it. But that does not mean that there is not a neutral perspective. There are a billion perspectives one can have in any now moment. You are opting into one. You have the ability, usually, to step back and offer yourself several more. Now, I'm going to take a moment here and add a note to reaction. Reaction is very important, especially for the women in the room, because the women in the room run a high amount of hormones in their physicality, in their adrenals, in their endocrine system, and your hormones will absolutely impulse you to react. This is a very true chemical experience. And all of you know it is extremely difficult to resist your hormones. Though, have all of you had the experience of accepting that you're having a reaction? Have all of you had, or rather, shall I ask, have any of you not had a situation where you have accepted your reaction before you actually made physical action on it? Does that make sense? Is there anybody in here who has not been able to do that consciously? Excellent. Because that is mastery. That is you sitting in the fire and understanding you can be angry that it's burning you, but you're opting to be in that fire. And all you have to do is step out. The burn might still be there. There might be energetic residue, though it will pass. This is very important because emotional reactions are usually short-lived. Emotional reactions are almost always the most damaging to relationships, both self and with others, regardless if it's another human being or your relationship with an environment or a situation. So if you can have conscious process around the mastery of allowing your reaction to exist and run the energy as we're running energetics with your grounding cords in this very moment, let the fire burn. You may need to act, and there are many very efficient ways in which to act and run that energy, such as running, such as screaming, such as throwing things not at other people. There are many, many ways in which you can run that energy through action, if need be, without directly reacting in a way that could possibly have detrimental effects and repercussions onto your relationships. Now, in regard to intersex relationships, men and women process on very different levels. There are extreme simplistic truths to the way in which women process, relate, comprehend, convey, feel. And there are very simplistic truths to how men do this as well. And there are very simplistic truths, albeit usually completely misunderstood, of how men interpret women and women interpret men. It is highly unfortunate for your prosperity in all relationships with opposite sex that your cultures and societies do not teach you from the get-go how to understand these very simple blueprints. It is in fact quite simple. All of you have memorized other formulas and ways to utilize things, such as your computers, such as putting on your clothes, such as memorizing your ABCs. You have all engaged in much more intricate endeavors than memorizing the simple formulas that in general all males navigate by and all females navigate by. And in that misunderstanding and in that ignorance is usually, for the most part, where all of the confusion and the upsets lie. There are many human beings in this world who have endeavored to give you these formulas and blueprints. So I behoove you, if you are having understandings and experiences where you're having difficult times interpreting relationships with either sex, simply memorize the formula so that you can be clear as day when you're following it or when you're not. This is a responsibility that both partners can take in order to better your relationship. This is very important. We watch many relationships crumble simply because the parties do not understand the base formula. If you think to yourself, what are your primary needs? What is it that you need most in your life? As a woman, you probably need safety. You probably need compassion, community, sensuality. There are many base needs that you require in order to feel wholesome. And then there are many secondary needs, as Rose has explained so eloquently. If you can understand your base needs and how you navigate to retrieve them, in the ways in which you communicate them and perceive them, you can start to glean what it is that you require from your partner. There are certain processes that are a constant that you utilize every day. If you and your partner can have awarenesses around these processes, you can always problem solve to help you feel that your needs are fed in the very specific, unique way in which you receive assistance in your needs. This is the same for the masculine. They have different needs. They need respect. They need adoration. They need appreciation. They need to know that they are serving you. And they have very specific ways in which they feel that they receive this and they process this. They have very different styles of communication. If you can simply learn these base formulas and stick to them, you can be clear when you or the other person is not using the formula, first of all. And then you can open up those general categories and start to see the family trees that stream down, in which you can start to pick and choose the options of how you solve the issue for this specific category. It can actually be quite simple, though all the while you must remember that ultimately it is imperative for you to stay with neutrality in order to process, because after all, you're speaking completely different languages. And in that neutrality, you can understand that you have your personal perspective of this, and they do too, and it does not make one right or one wrong. Now, in the topic of infidelity, this is a very important piece that most people do not even know how they feel about different understandings of their boundaries in infidelity and fidelity. Because after all, we are all aware that the way that we opt into experiencing our relationships intimately with self and others, with sensuality, with sexuality, varies. It does not make one right. It does not make one wrong. It is a variance. It is choice. And everybody is very unique in these preferences. Many of you are much more stringent on what you would deem emotional infidelity. Are you aware of your boundary? When is it too much for you or your partner to be connecting on an emotional level with another human being? Do you know these things? When is it too much for your partner or yourself to connect mentally, intellectually with another human being? When is it too much? When it's physical. There are many different versions of infidelity, and every person has very different interpretations of these. It is very important for all of you to get very clear on where your boundaries lie, and then get very clear on where your partner's boundaries lie. And then you must assess. Is this compatible? Is this incompatible? It is simply preference. Though when those boundaries are crossed, even unbeknownst to the other one, much damage can be done because it is very difficult in that moment for you to stay neutral to your emotional reaction when your partner has crossed your perceived boundary or vice versa. They did not always necessarily do something wrong, but they may have been completely unaware, they may have been aware, of your boundary, and vice versa. Are there any other questions? When we speak about self-love, it is so imperative for you to bring in acceptance of self. Understand that you have all gone through trauma, suffering, and energetic and emotional and mental situations that have rendered your experiences fractured. That is the human existence. As Rose spoke of before, your subconscious impacts your reality significantly more than your consciousness does. This is a very profound statement. Your subconscious impacts your reality significantly more than your consciousness. So much of you that you are not aware of is what creates the way you feel and the way you process. And because of that, it's imperative for you to be gentle with yourself and accept that when you're feeling or experiencing something, there could be a world of information and emotions behind that. You can accept that that exists. You don't have to dive in. You don't have to use that to justify how you're feeling, but you can be aware that it exists. And because of that, that can help you find compassion for self. You do not have all the tools. How can you possibly master your ability to fully comprehend what it is that's happening to you? You simply can't see it. So then what else is there in that moment? There's acceptance. There are many processes in which you can uncover this and unpack it, though ultimately it's a requirement for you to have compassion for your being if you want to love yourself. If you want to improve on your value and your worth, you must be compassionate because you are human, and to be human is to suffer. You do not have to stay in suffering, though you have experienced it and it has extreme value because it has taught you what joy is. It has taught you what safety is. When it comes to understanding how to let go of the past, it is imperative for you to understand that there's something you still value deeply from that past that you're not ready or willing to release. So it's imperative for you to identify, what is that? What is it that I value so completely from my past that I will not let it go because I need it in my now? When you identify that, and it will never be the person, it will never be the full situation, it will be the emotional response, it will be the way that you experience that. You can then realize that that emotional response and experience can stand alone without all of the influencing factors that created it for you in that specific situation. There are usually many, many ways in which you can experience one emotion. Though when you start to dive into why you hold on to the past, you will find that it will be rooted and anchored in suffering and trauma that was usually experienced before you even had the experience that you're thinking of. Because there's a core need that hasn't been addressed. And the more you can accept this piece and nurture yourself and tell your subconscious that you accept this truth and you want to understand, it will reveal to you. You're holding on to something for a very important reason. There's something that's of value to you that you do not want to leave behind. So you have to understand how you can understand and accept that it has value, even if it was tragic. There's value in it. Otherwise, you'd let it go. I doubt many of you leave rotting fruit around your house. There's no more value. You toss it out. If you keep it, you value it. Even if you don't like that particular thing you're keeping has value. That's okay. That's simply your judgment. That's simply you not understanding how many things your subconscious values. And with the acceptance that there is value, otherwise you would have let it go, you dive in and you reveal that value. Is there anything I can assist you with before I depart? I ask you to take a moment, open up your hearts and call in your higher guidance, however you resonate with that term. Show these benevolent beings what it is that you have resistance around, what it is that you have confusion around and conflict around. And as you act like opening up a pantry door, let it fly out like moths. And as these moths are flying about, searching for the light, look up and show us what it is that you enjoy. How do you feel when your needs are fulfilled? What do you desire? What are your happiest, most adventurous, most wonderful, most peaceful experiences? And allow us to rain this down onto you now and fill up all that spaces that the moths were filling. Give yourself permission and acceptance that even though you do not understand and maybe cannot see how we are gifting you your desires, offer us permission and acceptance that you trust that it is happening. You are willing to receive more joy, more love. Ask us to help you. You must always ask. You have free will. We will never impose onto you. You must ask. And we will always assist. We love you so very much. Thank you for coming in today. Call on us and we will be with you. Be well.